In-depth journalism in the Memphis community, the Daily Memphian is of Memphis, not just in Memphis, and seeks to tell the stories of this city. TheDailyMemphian.com. Truth in place.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's Daily Memphis Tigers Podcast with yours truly, Greg Gaston, joined once again today by Tigers basketball beat writer for the Daily Memphian, Parth Upadhyaya, and the Daily Memphian deputy sports editor and senior writer, Tim Buckley, also producer Natalie Van Gundy. And as we've been telling you now for probably about a month and a half, we are all in different places, 4 separate places, and hopefully before too long we'll be together again. But you know the situation. Again, I've heard that the audio is sounding really, really good, and I give all the credit in the world to Natalie for being able to put us together and make it sound real good. So here we are this week. The Tigers are winding down on their regular season on the hardwood. They got 3 games to go, including 2 games this week at East Carolina on Thursday, and then Senior Day, their home regular season finale on Sunday, as they'll take on the UAB Blazers. They have 1 more game after that. That would be the following Saturday in Boca Raton against Florida Atlantic. And speaking of Florida Atlantic, one of the showdowns that we couldn't wait for, guys, before the start of the season. This was one you circled, and that was Memphis hosting Florida Atlantic on Sunday. The Tigers coming off the win over Charlotte, looked really good in doing so. Would they be able to back it up? And they did, knocking off Florida Atlantic 78-74 to improve to 20-8 on the season, 9-6 in conference play. That's Penny Hardaway's 6th straight in 6 tries, 20-win season. Parth, let me begin with you. How impressive was that win and that performance?
Yeah, I thought it was very impressive. As much as Florida Atlantic has struggled throughout the season and, even in conference play, dropping some games they weren't supposed to, that was still an offense that was, top 15, top 25 in most metrics. They never trailed by more than 8, led by as many as 10, held the Owls to 43% and some change shooting, and 25% from 3. So yeah, it was absolutely impressive what they did on the defensive end. And on the other side of the ball, Naquan Tomlin, obviously, I think we'll get into him later, but him and David Jones, what they provided offensively was just as, if not more impressive.
Tim, your thoughts?
Yeah, it looked like the team that was clicking back before the holidays, and during the holidays. Certainly that tournament, first 2 games of that tournament in the Bahamas during Thanksgiving week, and then in between Thanksgiving and Christmas when they were knocking off the nationally ranks, or at least the nationally ranks at the time. But it looked like a team that didn't endure all of the issues that it did in January, early February. So you take that team, you go into Fort Worth, and maybe you can make some noise. You don't take that team, and you're in trouble.
Right, absolutely. I was impressed with a lot of different things. Parth, you touched on a few of those. I think the most impressive thing for me was the fact that they had only 6 turnovers. This is a team that averages double digits. They've had games where they've gone over 20 turnovers. They haven't really protected the basketball well this year. And to only give up 6 turnovers, plus they were able to force 13 of their own, cash in points against Florida Atlantic. In that sense, I thought that was really impressive.
And Jaquan Walton had none. David Jones had only 1, I believe, in the
Yes.
second half. And Tomlin had just 1. And it was only 3 in the first half, and I think a couple of them in the second half was when they were scrambling late. You had the one that they're trying to get over half court, and they got a Tomlin in the middle, and then he threw it away. So a couple of those were pressed late in the game. So that was terrific, especially the Quinterly factor and the Jones. Obviously, the David Jones factor has been an issue for David Jones numerous times throughout the season, but he totally had that cleaned up. And I think part of the reason why he's been able to clean it up is because he has kind of been more involved in the flow of the offense and less of the one-on-one stuff. And it just, it just reduces the likelihood that you're going to be making the kind of mistakes he was making when he's just going one-on-one all the time.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one of those turnovers of the 6 was Joe Cooper, who all of a sudden the last 3 games, the walk-on out of Northwest Mississippi Community College, has actually given Penny some good minutes, but he threw a bad cross-court pass. That was one of the 6. But JQ, Parth, 6 assists, no turnovers. You have a great chance to win basketball games when you have that type of an assist-to-turnover ratio from your point guard.
Yeah, no doubt. And when he's playing like that, when he's under control and when he's engaged, I think he's a top 20 point guard. I don't know what you guys think, but, right up there with some of the best in the country when he's playing like that. Tim, you said it. They only had 6 turnovers and 2 were in the last 101, I believe, when they threw those kind of crazy. One was a crazy cross-court pass by David Jones, I think. And the other one was Tomlin streaking down the court, trying to hit Walton on a fast break bucket there. So, yeah, I think, Javon was special. David Jones played under control. And on the other end, they forced 13 turnovers and scored, I think, 18 or 19 points off of those. So
yes,
to not only, be aggressive and be in control on the offensive end, but then to have a Florida Atlantic offense that's, usually poised and scores a lot of points, looking out of sorts. I think that combination was obviously one of the keys to them winning that game.
I was just going to say, I thought we saw more patience on offense, actually a few more plays designed where we saw one time coming out of a timeout, they went right into Jourdain to try to go quickly up on Golden to force a foul, and it's exactly what happened right out of a timeout. That was a play they designed. And I thought, more importantly, defensively, Tim, defense saw them swarming. When they did try to trap, they were able to communicate, so they weren't leaving guys absolutely wide open. There were a few breakdowns, don't get me wrong, but I think overall that was a much improved defensive effort.
They played with high energy. I'm sure the crowd had a little bit to do with that. I thought it was the best atmosphere easily for a conference game this season in FedEx Forum. I think the opponent probably had something to do with it, because I think obviously we've learned that this Tigers team is one that plays up well and does not play down well. And so that probably factored in. And it's funny because Penny Hardaway was talking afterwards about buy-in and how there's finally, it feels like there's buy-in now, and how enjoyable it is to coach a team like this where, everybody's buying in. Well, that's like saying that, like, if you go to a butcher shop, you expect the butcher to cut the meat. Like, that's what you're supposed to do. But at least they're finally doing it.
Yeah, 28 games into the season, they finally bought into it. But jeez. I like how he motivated the team, Parth, with the videos that were shown. We weren't privy to that, but we heard after the game, as Penny talked about it, and some of the players did as well, that Penny showed video of last year's NCAA tournament game with Florida Atlantic. Obviously, a very disappointing loss for the Tigers in the very end. And then he also showed a little bit of Kansas State's loss to Florida Atlantic, which was an elite game, and Naquan Tomlin, of course, having played for Kansas State, a disappointing loss for them. So whatever it took, he found ways to go into his bag of tricks to motivate this team.
Yeah, no doubt. And that video, I haven't seen it myself, but just that concept of gathering that group together and saying, hey, this is what we're playing for. Minutes before tip-off, I thought that was very cool. Paris Cole, I want to shout him out. I think he works social media for Memphis Athletics and works with basketball closely, does photo, does video, does Twitter stuff as well. But he was the one tasked with creating that video. It had been sitting for a few weeks, I think, and then they kind of added layers to it. When they got Tomlin, they added the element of FAU celebrating the locker room after beating Kansas State, obviously, which was a team that Tomlin was a part of last season. So, Penny Hardaway, Paris Cole, and everybody a part of the Memphis basketball team kind of found the right buttons to push. And we saw a very, very, very motivated Tigers team yesterday because of it.
I'm just glad that Parth was the guy who handled the story on what the song was that Kansas State used last season, and then was the song that FAU was playing, and
Lowdown.
that Parth was on hand to handle all the pop culture there.
He's our music guy. He knows all that stuff. If it was Lawrence Welk, you and I, Tim, would be able to handle that. But it's modern music, my friend. And yeah, Paris does an unbelievable job with video. He's the guy who has shot the videos and edited the videos that I've done with the 94 feet deal. We walk in, I walk and talk with the players, and that runs on social media. It's really, really good. All right, getting back to this particular game. So no Malcolm Dandridge, and we're going to dive into that topic a little bit later on, but no Malcolm Dandridge. So already they were shorthanded as far as their front line to go up against a big, strong Florida Atlantic player like Golden, who ended up having a 9-for-9 game. But I thought the combination of Jourdain, Tomlin, and even Walton chipping in did a pretty good job. Not a great job, because the guy, again, was 9-for-9 and had a real nice game. But they were shorthanded, Parth, not having Malco. And we'll see what the situation will be when they go to Florida Atlantic and play them on their home court, because that guy is a load. So obviously Malco did not play in this game. We'll talk more about that in a second. But without Malco, they were shorthanded on the front line to go up against a guy like Golden, who certainly is a dominating force and went a perfect 9-for-9 from the field. But even though he had a really good game, I thought for the most part, the combination of Jourdain, who I thought was really good, was the unsung hero for the Tigers. Tomlin, and we're going to talk about him being honored by the conference. He was great. And then even Jaquan Walton chipping in. Sometimes he had to defend Golden. I thought Parth, they did an admirable job, but certainly not having Malco hurt. And if they don't have him for the game in Boca Raton, will hurt as well. We don't know that yet, but to not have that big guy against that monster Golden, that's a tough challenge.
Yeah, no doubt. Malco's 6'9", 260.
Right.
I don't think there's a player on Memphis' team that's that physically imposing. There's guys who are tall, Naquan Tomlin, 6'10", Jourdain, 6'9", but man, Malco's a wrecking ball down there when he's engaged and when he's focused. And you saw it. You saw it early, the impact of his absence early against FAU. I think Vlad Golden had 8 of his points in the first 10 minutes alone, had 12 and 5, I believe, 12 and 4, actually, in the first half. And it looked like it was going to be a problem. But Memphis took away everything else, I thought, really well. John L. Davis had 20 points, but he, shot 15 times to get there. And Memphis, said, hey, if Vlad wants to beat us, have at it. And he was 9-for-9, 22 points, 8 rebounds, but obviously that alone was not enough.
Yeah, Tim, that's where they did a good job from a team concept, trying to communicate as best they can. They switched off well. Again, the guy's a dominating big man, but I thought overall their defense, again, was much, much improved.
Yeah, look, the Big Russian ended up 9-for-9.
Right.
And, had 22 points or whatever it was, but it could have been much worse if it wasn't for the fact that they did a good job of kind of, allowing him to, take what he was going to get anyway without wasting a foul on it, but then taking other opportunities to just kind of keep him off the block and doing it in a way where it wasn't overly physical, because the last thing in the world they could afford to do with Malcolm Dandridge out and Jordan Brown barely able to play because of apparently a back issue, was get their bigs in foul trouble. I mean, they couldn't afford to foul out Naquan Tomlin or Nick Jourdain, and they did a real good job kind of handling that. And I thought it was also interesting how Jaquan Walton, he stepped up, in a real time of need. And it was interesting. We were sitting, as you two know, before the game, over breakfast. I think Greg had about 37 strips of the bacon.
38.
38. And anyway, we were talking about, you guys were shocked that Jaquan Walton was back in the starting lineup. At least one of you was shocked that Walton was back in the starting lineup. because obviously that prior game against Charlotte, he came off the bench and they used Tomlin at the three. Well, what else were they going to do?
Yep.
That was the natural thing. They're starting to run out of choices here. So I think they handled the whole situation well. And even though he was 9-9, it could have been way, way worse. And they probably would have lost.
Yeah, I think it was me that said that, and it was the only reason I said that. And I knew they were shorthanded, and I wasn't sure what Brown's back situation was. Like, if he was able to go, I thought maybe they could start Brown. But the reason I said that was because if we go back just 2 games ago when they got clobbered at SMU and the sky was falling, changes were going to be made. He went out on Wednesday in that game against Charlotte and made one change in the starting lineup, took out Jaquan Walton, and it worked. And Walton came in with that just a whole different guy to help them beat Charlotte. So I thought, whoa, they found something here with Walton. Maybe he'll come back off the bench and also bring that energy. And there he was in the starting lineup. Again, more for necessity, but I liked if they had the full arsenal to go with him off the bench, because if he was teaching him a lesson, it worked. But is the lesson over in one session? It seems like that's the case, because it happened also with Quinterly earlier in the year when he didn't start a game, seemingly was being disciplined, and then played 33 minutes and started the next game.
Yeah, and they might have gone that way had Dandridge, or they probably would have gone that way had Dandridge been available. But you really had no other choice at that point, which brings up the hypothetical, Greg, of Dandridge does play in that game. Did the Tigers win it?
Right. You're absolutely right to ask that question. Again, hypothetical. We don't know. Tigers fans are happy the way it ended, but I don't know if they win that game, because if Malco's playing, then you have more bodies. That means possibly Penny rotates a little bit sooner. You noticed he did not make a change until after that first media timeout. Parth, what do you think? Do the Tigers still have the same result? Is it a dub if Malco's had a good year, don't get me wrong, but is it still a dub if Malco was playing?
Yeah, I think so. I think he, obviously Penny would have more choices, and that kind of jumbles things up with rotations and that sort of deal. But just what Malco brings on the court, I think would offset any kind of sporadic rotations that Penny is gonna use and throw out there. He would have. I don't think the big Russian goes 9 for 9 if Malco's down there bodying him. Do y'all?
No, probably.
I don't know.
Probably not. But again, how is the rotation impacted if Dandridge is in there? Does Tomlin, go off like he was able to?
Right.
Obviously, got more opportunity on Sunday. And the other part of all that is, I thought both Tomlin and Jourdain did a good job of not allowing Golden to get under their skin, which he, from just watching some of FAU's games, catching them on TV, he's very good at doing.
Right.
Yeah.
And they didn't get suckered into that, which is something gonna be to keep an eye on. Obviously in that last regular season game against FAU, and again if the Tigers get them in the conference tournament in Fort Worth. And I think a big part of the reason why that didn't happen, and credit goes either to Penny Hardaway or whoever made the decision on that Tigers coaching staff, but Tomlin started on Golden initially, and they were going at it. They had the arms, wrapping around, and they were tussling, and referees glancing over at them, and just waiting for that thing to flare up. And they switched off pretty quick and got Jourdain on them, and it didn't have near the potential for flare up as when it was Tomlin and Golden, and then things kind of settled down a little bit. If all that had gotten out of control early, the Tigers might have been looking at a foul situation, and it's something that they're going to need to avoid when they go down to Boca Raton. And I say that only just because I love saying Boca Raton.
Well, I think you make two really, really good points. And by the way, Walt had 4 fouls, but Tomlin and Jourdain only 3 fouls battling the big guy. Yeah, and I think you're right. And we'll leave it at that as far as the hypothetical with Malco. But I think you're onto something, Tim, because maybe if you have that big 6'9", 260-pound anchor back there, you don't come with the intensity that those guys did to battle down low because you got Malco there. So maybe they don't play like they did. Again, it's a hypothetical. I know that it worked out well for the Tigers. We'll see if they get the big guy back, which we'll talk about again in a second.
And don't get me wrong. I mean, I'd rather go in with them than without him.
Absolutely.
It just happened to work out really well in this instance without him. Whether that can be maintained, if it needs to be for 1 or 2 more games, we shall see.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about Naquan Tomlin, named the American Conference Player of the Week today, which is Monday as we tape this week. 8.5 points per game, 7 rebounds per game, 1.5 steals per game, 1.5 blocks per game in the 2 wins over Charlotte and then over Florida Atlantic. He played, Parth, in my opinion, Sunday like a guy that should get a look in the NBA.
Yeah, absolutely. He did a lot of things. I think he hit a couple threes as well.
He did.
Didn't handle the ball as much as we'd seen in the past when he was playing the 3 for, I think, 1 or 2 games. But, man, he was ferocious. He was the 6'11" monster that we know he can be. And, these scouts are starting to pop up at more and more games. They're looking for David Jones, but Tomlin's right there as well.
And he went through the draft process.
He did. Yep.
Last season. So he'll be on a summer league team certainly, and he'll get his opportunity. And it certainly helped too, like we talked about a little bit earlier, that it was very personal for him.
I think it could be a mid to late second rounder if he keeps this level of play up. Now we got to see if that happens, but there's plenty of games left for him to turn heads.
I haven't seen the Memphis Tigers names, David Jones, Naquan Tomlin. I have not seen them on many of the mocks. I've seen Jones every once in a while in the second round. Even if they don't get drafted, as Tim said, these guys are going to be on a summer league team. They're going to get a look. I'm not saying, and I'm not going to sit here and say these guys are all NBA players, but I think there's no question about it. David Jones, Naquan Tomlin, and maybe even Quinterly are going to get looks with NBA teams.
For sure. And Quinterly's another guy who went through that draft process, didn't get the feedback that he would have liked, obviously, and decided to return to school. But Quinterly and Tomlin actually worked out for the Bucks together, if I'm not mistaken, the Milwaukee Bucks. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think Jones and Tomlin are, the more obvious choices in terms of just game translating from college to NBA and, potentially sneaking into the second round, if not for Jones, early second round. But yeah, JQ as well. I think he's somebody that will get a look at the very least.
So Sunday, the end of the weekend, ends in a smile fest, let's just say, at FedEx Forum for fans, for the players, for the coaching staff. Everybody ended the weekend extremely happy. The weekend started, though, with a lot of question marks. There was a lot of rumors out there, a lot of speculation. And we won't speculate here on the podcast, but we'll tell you what we know. We do know this, as we just alluded to. Malcolm Dandridge wasn't in that starting lineup. So there is a lot still to be investigated from the university standpoint, Parth. But what else do we know about this alleged academic misconduct-related situation that at least Malcolm Dandridge's name has come up?
Yeah. So, what the university has put out is kind of very little, right? Like they said that Dandridge is out. They're withholding him from any games, any competition while they internally investigate they called it a potential issue. That's the way they phrased it, impacting his eligibility. A source with direct knowledge of the situation confirmed to me later that day on Saturday after the university put out their statement that that situation is related to, potential alleged academic misconduct on Dandridge's part. Various things, some rumors, some not, had been floating around out there since Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. That's the first I had heard of it. Obviously, sourcing standards and just various things, kept us from reporting it in the Daily Memphian, publishing it in writing or what have you. But yeah, it doesn't sound good.
So again, as we sit here and we record this podcast, there's just nothing new other than the statement that was made by the University of Memphis and the fact that Malcolm Dandridge did not play in the game on Sunday. But if more details become available, and when, I guess, they become available, certainly Parth and all the great folks at the Daily Memphian will have that. So make sure to always tune in and to follow Parth and to follow Tim and follow everybody at the Daily Memphian. Okay, so East Carolina, UAB, then basically the week until they play that Saturday at Boca Raton, because I like saying Boca as well, Tim, and play Florida Atlantic again. How do you get the energy that we saw on Sunday bottled up and brought with them to little old Greenville, North Carolina, a nice quaint town in the eastern part of the state of North Carolina? How can they match that intensity, Parth?
That's tough because, ECU's been struggling. I think they're one game. The Pirates are one game above 500. I expect that gym to be mostly empty. And the Tigers just haven't, looked great on the road. We saw it in Texas where they dropped 2 games. If they can bring their own juice, bring their own energy, so to speak, then they'll be fine. But I can imagine that's hard to do when, you're playing East Carolina, on a Thursday in front of probably, a few hundred fans?
Yeah. Well, they've been a Jekyll and Hyde team, Memphis, and East Carolina in the past. I've called games at Minji's Coliseum, and they don't have a huge following, but when they would play Memphis and Memphis was ranked, they would go crazy. Now, Memphis is not ranked. Memphis is almost in the middle of the pack of the conference. They're in 6th out of 14 teams. So maybe they don't have that intensity as far as the fans are concerned. But, Tim, certainly knowing that you're still on the outside looking in, and a loss would definitely put you outside, that you would think that they would be able to take some of what they had on Sunday and bring it with them.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. And I mean, also to be fair, I don't think it's right to call them a Jekyll and Hyde team. I mean, this
Memphis?
is no, yeah, it's more like Hannibal Lecter and St. Francis of Assisi. I mean, they're like just ridiculous extremes.
I was too lenient on him, huh?
And yeah, absolutely. I also thought it was cool how you're able to just, I go with the geographic, very formal, specific Boca Raton. You drop just the cool Boca. I wish I was that cool.
Boca, baby.
Boca. Look, basically not leaving it at home after what you did on Saturday is going to be key for them when they play East Carolina. Because they can't afford to be reveling in what they did and forget what's right in front of their noses. And the other easy part of that is you just look at the schedule and see 3 more games, and then you got to have your act together in Fort Worth. Because even if you do win these 3 games, you still got to reel off some wins in the tournament, and at a minimum,
at least 3.
Get to the title game. So. Yeah, you can't let the intensity level drop, even though the circumstances won't be there in terms of the home court advantage or what they had to play for with FAU knocking them out last season.
Yeah, that I asked Penny after the game if the Tigers are able to win their next 3, which includes that win against Florida Atlantic for a second time, should they be in the conversation again for an at-large? And he said, absolutely. Now, I don't know if they will be. They would certainly creep up a little bit. And a lot of the bubble teams took a big hit over this past weekend. But right now, Parth, I'm not so sure that even finishing off the regular season on a 5-game winning streak will put Memphis at the tip of the tongues of the important people who make these selections.
Yeah, I think they'd be, in the conversation, which is very vague, right? What does that even mean? Right now, they're not listed on any bracketology, whether it's, first 4 in, last 4 in, first 4 out, whatever it may be. Those bubble teams that are listed on various projections, they're not there. If you look on, Bart Torvik, that site does a good job of kind of looking at more than just those 8 or, 12 teams that most sites show you. I think Memphis is 17th in terms of the teams that are out, on the outside looking in. So they're 17th on that list. There's been a lot of chaos, with the bubble, as we know. So you never know. I just don't, I'm with you, Greg. I don't think that just winning these next 3 games is going to, be enough to even put you in Dayton in that first 4 game. But, if they can win these next three, you get to Sunday in Fort Worth, you get to the title game, and you play a really, really, really competitive game against, Florida Atlantic or SMU or whoever, then there might be, a serious conversation to be had. But obviously the safest bet is just to go out and, win the dang thing.
For sure. I mean, and you did ask that question, Greg, but my question for you is, what did you expect them to say? No. Nah, you know what? They should just ignore us.
No, I didn't expect him to say no, but I mean, you can tell by the way he says things like that. Like he absolutely believes that 3 more wins, they're definitely in that conversation. And we're saying that I'm not so sure they are in that conversation.
Yeah.
He believes, and it's not because he's the coach and that's the way he should react. I think he actually believes that if they get 3 more wins, I could have taken it one step farther because he probably would think that they should be in as an at-large. I should have asked him that.
Yeah, I agree.
I know how he feels about this team.
And I agree, he probably does think that. But you know what? Maybe if they do, just depending on how all the pairings end up and everything, if they do end up with, 3 wins in total over FAU on the season, and they lose to a South Florida who maybe is an at-large candidate itself in the championship game, and then some other crazy stuff happens on the bubble. Yeah, maybe you are in the conversation, to use your terminology at that point. But just 3 and a bow out at the tournament isn't going to come close to it.
No, South Florida is not getting an at-large bid. I've seen that. I've seen kind of murmurs of that on Twitter and, people chatting, and, the AP poll obviously is different. A lot of those folks, I don't know what they're doing. Not that South Florida doesn't deserve a vote, but man, I just don't see South Florida getting an at-large bid.
So you're saying that's bold.
I see what you mean.
The AP poll has nothing to do with the criteria when it comes to the selection committee making their decision. It has nothing to do with it. So yes, they're in the top 25 this week. Give them all the credit in the world. They have really turned it. And you know when they turned around the season? When they came back from 20 down against Memphis to win here in Memphis. That's when they turned around their season.
That's crazy.
And by the way, if Florida Atlantic 3 times to Memphis, they aren't getting an at-large. Nope. So it'll be, in my opinion. So I'll be curious to see who gets that AQ if it's not Florida Atlantic, or if it's not Memphis, if it's SMU, let's say, or somebody else. Does anybody else get in as an at-large? I think it could end up being a 1-bid league when it's all said and done.
SMU's legit. I mean, we've seen them twice now. They look the part of a tournament team. I think with their case, they just don't have the resume to get in that large because they didn't schedule tough enough in the non-conference. But yeah, I think if they were to get in, as a AQ, they could make some noise.
So what you're saying is the best bet for the league is just to tear up the floor that's going to be down in Fort Worth and redo all the graphics and just pretend like they're the Mountain West tournament.
What?
And Mountain West is a good league, man. Mountain West is a really good basketball league.
Well, we don't have to go down that road again, but I think people got to understand, if you don't pick up big wins in the non-conference portion of your schedule, first of all, you got to schedule those teams, and then you got to win some of those games. That helps you in the long run. But Tim, I think what's important as we get ready to wrap this thing up is what you said. Forget about whether or not they're in the conversation, they're on the bubble, or whatever they are at the end of this regular season. If they can win 3 more, they have gained back all that momentum they had at the beginning of the year. And why can't they go in there? I know it would more than likely be 4 in 4 days, because getting into the top 4 is going to take almost a miracle. They're going to need a lot of help from other teams. But even if it's 4 in 4 days, it's not out of the question that they couldn't do it if they go in red hot by winning their final 5.
Absolutely. And it's I've seen crazier things in conference tournaments. I've seen really lousy seeded teams win it all. So anything's possible, but you need to go in on a high note. Sometimes you get to the point where you've won 12 in a row at the end of the regular season. All of a sudden you're putting pressure on yourself to not falter even a bit in the conference tournament. This is the streak right now that you have to continue at this point.
No question about it. Parth, safe travels to Greenville, North Carolina for the game on Thursday night.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I'll get to fly into Raleigh and spend a night at my family's house, get a home cooked meal in me before I head to Greenville. So that'll be good.
Very, very nice.
Yep.
And then, of course, the two of you will be back on Sunday as the Tigers will have senior day, final game of the regular season at home against Andy Kennedy and UAB. Another one of those revenge games. They have one already with Tulane that they were able to get the W. They'll try again against UAB. And then, as we talked about, Florida Atlantic, as they will try to get that revenge against Memphis, and that'll be a week from this Saturday. Gentlemen, thank you so much.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, y'all. Fun as always.
Well, folks, make sure you check out our other podcasts at the Daily Memphian, the Daily Memphian's Food Podcast, Sound Bites. It's hosted by Chris Harrington and Holly Whitfield. The Sidebar with Eric Barnes is about arts, culture, and everything in between. And the Grizzlies podcast is also hosted by Chris Harrington with Drew Hill. All of our podcasts are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find podcasts. For Parth and Tim and our producer, Natalie Van Gundy, I'm Greg. Great week, everybody. Have a terrific week. We'll talk to you again next week.